Hi there, I'm Kate Holmes. I am the host of the podcast Put Down the Mascara, which is a podcast that focuses on education of women and how to live authentically. Having so much fun doing this, and we have some returning guests today because we had so much fun the first time. I have Sharon and Betty with SB Private Wealth Group, and we're going to be talking about how to cover your assets. So, divorce is expensive.
Yes, it is.
50-50, you're splitting, you have to rebuild. And women, and men too, but women, because we like to have a focus on women, have worked really hard to build back up their net worth.
Yeah.
And in today's world, there's all sorts of blending of new families, and that's really exciting. It's special. But yet, as women, we need to be thinking about how to protect what we have worked for. Not an easy conversation to have with a new partner and a loved one, but so important. So let's talk a little bit about why that's important first off.
I think, let's reverse back and we'll start at the beginning. I think right now, women are choosing to get married later in life.
Yes.
Women are choosing careers first over marriage and families. So they're coming to relationships. I guess both parties are coming to relationships in a different manner. It's no longer starting with nothing from both sides. So incomes are different, assets are different when you're coming into that. So it's the conversation is being had in a different way.
It is.
Yeah, and I think the reality is when you go into a marriage, your perspective is always different than when you're coming out of a marriage.
I have so much to say about that, but I'm not going to.
But it goes to your point about why it's a difficult conversation on the way in, because we're in love and we're happy and everything's perfect and, you know, it's all rosy.
And in that moment it is.
In that moment it is. And we feel uncomfortable having that conversation about money and protecting our assets, CYA.
Yes.
But when we're on the other side of the conversation on the way out, that's when money becomes a contentious issue. And it often ends up costing a lot more if you haven't done the pre-work to get out for both parties. But particularly in what we tend to see, women are not always as protected on the way in as they might have been had they had some good advice.
Right. Or an experience that led them to thinking about it the second time around.
Exactly.
Yes. And we actually met with someone who had something really interesting to say today. It was, we don't enter any other contract, any other legal agreement without putting some parameters in place. And I don't know why in marriage we all don't have the same sort of expectations or do our same due diligence.
And what types of parameters are you going to suggest that women put into place?
Oh, wow. There's lots of different ones, but it's funny. I think if we look at this historically, the whole prenup conversation, it tended to be something that wealthy men was more commonplace, would coming into a second marriage would want to protect those assets.
Right.
So what we see nowadays is a lot of women come in to those situations, as you said earlier, with equal or more assets and income earning opportunity. So to answer your question, what are you protecting? Sometimes it's assets coming into the marriage, but it's also about proper estate planning. So as a single woman myself with 2 kids, you know, if I were to enter into another marriage or cohabitation situation, I want to make sure that I've done proper planning so that my kids are getting the wealth that I want to pass on to them in the way that I intend, and not have circumstances dictate that.
And again, the law doesn't, and we're not lawyers and we don't have a law background. The law will often split things in a way that you didn't wish to see or intended. So back to Sharon's point, is her wealth was made before she meets the new person, and that wealth would want to be passed on to her children. But to your point, blended families, things could be split equally amongst all children, and that's not often the intention either direction.
Whatever direction it takes, as long as you've decided on that.
Absolutely.
That's important.
Absolutely.
It's the intention.
That's the intention, and being thoughtful about those choices that you are making. Not an easy conversation to have.
It's not.
But
But it's
typically
necessary.
totally necessary. And typically women haven't spoken about money.
That's right.
It's a lot. I would think that I would be more comfortable having that conversation before I got into the marriage versus 5 years down the road when both families are very blended and there's a lot more emotion and love in those situations, to be pragmatic about how finances are split up if or when something should happen to either one. So I think it's a difficult conversation I think it's a much more difficult conversation in the midst of it.
I think the good news, though, too, is that when we think of prenups now, I think, once again, historically, they felt more one-sided. But I think nowadays, like, coming to the table, it's about both parties. Yes. So it's less about I'm protecting my interests and more about let's collectively protect our interests and make sure we're aware of what our intentions are. And so collaborative.
Absolutely.
It is. And that maybe makes the conversation easier, I think.
I think so, and I think a lot of our intention, and we've shared this with you, is just about having the conversation. Money is uncomfortable, having these conversations around the what ifs is uncomfortable, but we have to have them, and we have to make them more commonplace so that more people are having them.
Have them early, have them often.
Yes.
Because circumstances can also change.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And that's okay, but you need to be talking about it, and it's very important for both parties to have that level of protection. And sometimes things go sideways.
Yep.
I don't even know what the divorce rate is now, probably more than 50-50. I know back in the day it used to be 50-50. And so it makes things much simpler on the way out as well.
That's right. Well, and I think, we were talking about this earlier, is that, what we're getting from our clients is, if it should go sideways, is people just want to move on now. I think hopefully long as the long years of fighting, paying lawyers and dragging out hurt feelings, I think people just realize that life is short and we just want to be happy and move on.
But Betty mentioned something earlier that's really important. She talked about contracts, that we wanted different contracts. And we don't go into employment or buying a home or anything without negotiating the terms of the contract. And so it's not always just about marriage. Like, you can get into a, prenuptial agreement before you cohabitate. Yes. So it's really just setting out I call it the rules of engagement. These are the terms, and it's not very romantic to think about it that way, but
it certainly isn't.
You can
go for a candlelight dinner after you sign.
Open a bottle of wine. But the reality is, this is a contract. We're entering into something that has legal implications long term. So let's just talk about, the terms of engagement and what we want that contract to look like. Here's what I'd like to see. What would you like to see? And hopefully people are engaging a professional to help them draw that up so that it does have that weight if it were to ever have to be used. But, it doesn't have to be a contentious conversation.
No.
Well, and I think someone mentioned is, there's the dating apps, and I'm not familiar with them, but, I think people are laying out, like, this is what I'm looking for and this is what I'm looking for. Why is this any different? Like, I want 3 children, and should we separate? The house that I'm coming into is going to stay with me and half those children.
Right.
Common sense. When you talk in those terms, it's absolutely common sense.
Sure.
And sometimes we get a little bit blinded about what's in front of us and the emotions that we're having, and we need to kind of take that out and think about the business practical side of things. Anything else that you would like to add?
Oh my gosh, this is a big topic, and we're talking about prenups in particular.
Yes.
But I think when we talk about covering your assets, that's a big conversation.
It's
much
more than just
many
a prenup.
podcasts.
There's lots of different things, but one of the things, and I hope it's okay to bring it up in this context, but particularly for women as they re-enter that, let's say, that dating world after having maybe been out of it for a long period of time, to just be very careful when they get into those. And the reality is, online dating is a place that most people tend to meet these days. But there's a lot of things you have to be, we because we've seen it, we always, want to say to every woman out there, like, just be very mindful before you start either sending money, giving money to anybody that you ever meet online, because it's so easy for people to misrepresent themselves behind a screen or an app. And
anybody can text.
And we have unfortunately seen in our world women, accomplished, smart women who've, been in that situation where they've been vulnerable and maybe, have given out money that they didn't want to give out. And so we talk about, covering your assets, it's more than just a prenup. It's about when you're in that dating space that might lead up to the need for a prenup, being very careful about knowing, you know, who you're getting engaged with. When I say engaged, I mean I don't mean literally engaged.
Going on dates.
Yes. And, you know, making sure that before you start blending the assets, you're very comfortable with who's the person on the other side of that.
Yes.
And just further to that, I think, because often when we're back on the dating scene, it means that we're no longer in our relationships, that it's probably been a long time since we've been in relationships. And I think the landscape's changed, and often it's post-split of assets. I just, you know, if I could ask women to please, like, try to take and empower themselves around their finances before they get into that next step, so they really have the power to make decisions, you know, whether they're going to engage in that relationship or not, just to be able to just have knowledge is power. So
It is.
know where they sit in terms of their finances before they enter another phase in their life.
Really good point. And the dating world is not what it used to be 10, 20 years ago. It's very accessible. You can hide behind your phone, and people do sense that vulnerability in that moment. And so being very mindful of who you're sending money to, that you're talking to, is a very important point, because that could drain your resources.
Absolutely.
And that's sad that has happened to people, and I'm glad that we're able to bring that up and hopefully give some people some knowledge. There's scams in every aspect of life.
For sure. Yes.
Add in that technology and you're in trouble. So
I think the positive is there's still people out there looking to get into relationships, and us being vulnerable means that we're opening up again. So there's a positive to it all.
Yeah. There is.
And the good news is a lot of those prenups will never get used. So there you go. That's the positive. Right?
There is absolutely lots of positives in this. This is, you know, a conversation about protecting yourself, covering your assets, but it's also about, like, excitement. This is you going to the next level, but it's also taking the appropriate steps to make sure. So there is a lot of
Honest way.
It's an honest way. Yes, but there's excitement along the way as well. And in day-to-day life, at work, we get excited about new projects we're working on, and that's
exactly.
But we also have read the contract.
That's right.
So do the
know the
same
terms and conditions
as you're running your own life.
Right.
Think about that as well. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
That's right. Yeah. And thanks for the title. That was such a catchy. Cover your assets.
It is so important to do that. And Sharon and Betty, please reach out if you have any further financial questions. We are certainly here to maybe guide you in the right direction. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
And that's today's episode of Put Down the Mascara. Before we sign off, I want to drop a friendly reminder your way. While we do our best to bring you helpful insights, stories, and perspectives on this podcast, I want to make it clear that we're not here to replace counselors, advisors, and experts. Remember, education and empowerment are journeys we embark on together, and seeking guidance from experts along the way is great for your personal growth. Thanks again for tuning in to Put Down the Mascara. We can't wait to have you back next time. Your feedback, stories, and suggestions keep us going and fuel our passion for empowering women everywhere.